writing a character, would you plan to play this character? Do you write the character for yourself when you're writing it? And does that change the writing at all?
That's a very good question. I think when I wrote this, I knew I wanted to be in it just because I wanted, as an actor, even to explore this kind of world. But I really didn't think like whether or not I was going to play Emma or Lillian. But I think as I was writing it, as I was developing it, like suddenly it was like just very clear to me, like I'm not Emma, like, you know, like I'm not, it's not really my wheelhouse as an actor. And as a director, it was like the director side of my brain was like, you're the wrong casting for that role. You know what I mean? So then it was kind of cool to, because I also acted my first feature film, Scrap, and I played the lead in that. And so I actually thought it would be really interesting for me as director to maybe step back and not play the main role in my second feature. So I really enjoyed it. And I mean, like Scottie's performance is, like there's no way I could have ever played an Emma anywhere close to what she does in this movie. So yeah, everything worked out exactly as it should have been.
I suppose cinematography, it's something it's so prevalent, and it's something that's so obvious, and creating the tone and without, you know, essentially electricity. So talk about creating the tone of the film using essentially just candlelight, really.
Yeah, so that's something we talked a lot about with Vivian in prep, and the fact that we would have to explore this world where electricity was not here yet, at least not in every household. And so we talked about imitating candlelights and really featuring candlelights or fire into the chimneys in the house, etc. So sometimes you see it's real, we have real fire on set, including candles, but we had some locations that wouldn't allow any real fire. So we really had to fake it and imitate it, but everything is done on set. Like every single effect you see of fire is actually accomplished on set, either with lighting or either with real fire, basically. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also like this is like part of the incredible accomplishment of this film. Like all of the lighting is practical. Like none of it, you know, whether some of the fireplace stuff I think is like artificial, but I mean, you were dealing with like what we actually had on set, and that was it. But I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I think, yeah, your cinematography is so beautiful in this film. Like what you achieved is so amazing.
Jilon, I have a question of your character. Well, first of all, the characters they're so great because they're put in this awkward situation, and it just creates this like kind of this pressure cooker that creates these fascinating characters. I guess so. My question is, how early on were you planning to go back to your second wife? Is that something that you think was more of a in the moment kind of created, or do you think that started early on?
You know what's weird is that we shot this 2 years ago, and I've not seen any of it. And so to see it now, it was such a fascinating trip of, I don't remember anything. Like, I was just like, what? Wow. And then suddenly all these conversations come flooding back, like with what you just asked. And so what we basically kind of talked about was that George had planned like all of it. And then it was thrust a little ahead of schedule, and he had to carry it out now. So yeah, the fascinating thing for me was he's trying to get rid of his wife by driving her crazy so he can have his true love back that he screwed up and lost. So the interesting line to walk was, how do you win her? How do you get her? Don't be mean. And she was like, just be so nice. Just be nice. You just be like, don't want to suspect you at all. And so that, even though at times I was like, I wanted to be mean. I would, anyway. So, and we played in a ton of different ways, and it was really interesting to see what became. Yeah, but it was, yeah. So anyway, that was, really just fascinating to go down this trip again and be like, oh yeah. love that you lifted the table. Because I didn't know that would happen. I was like, I didn't know if that gag would sell, you know? And the fact that she lifted it, I was like, oh, okay, good. Because I was like, I imagine that table to be a lot heavier than that, you know? So, well done.
Scottie, I guess what we're kind of left with is kind of that, I guess from your character's perspective, it's kind of wrapped up and like almost going on with this happy life. Is that what we're supposed to take from this? Because it wasn't too long earlier you were ready to go back to your first husband. But are we supposed to be left with happy life with the baby coming and good from here on out?
I mean, it kind of feels that way. I think that was, I'm like you, the same as you. I'm like, wow, that was a long time ago. Where was my brain process in that? But yeah, I think it's thinking about Emma having been stuck between kind of a rock and a hard place, in wanting to go back to what was and have feelings again, in terms of like sensuality and feeling desired, and also being drawn to, you know, to Albert for his goodness and who he is. So I felt like that was the thing that ultimately Emma came around to. You know, you get sucked in by the you know, sensual appeal, I guess, and that desire to be desired, and realizing, oh, this is all just a romanticization of what was, and then you can actually see through to what is. And I felt like there was an aspect of just surrendering to seeing what is in front of her, and surrendering to that and realizing, oh, this is actually a better choice.
Vivian, that final shot, what's the takeaway there? With that fake a little
sequel.
Yeah.
She goes to visit them in Texas to steal their baby. It's impossible. That's what we were joking about on set. We were like, well, maybe there's a really fun sequel in Texas. Yeah, I think it was more just kind of like, you know, giving a little bit of a fun button. Actually, sorry, we thought about putting it actually at the end of the credits, but then like, you know, these days, do people stay through the credits? We don't know. So we were like, no, we'll put it at the end.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Yep.
I would just love to know about those houses. Like, where do you film? Those beautiful places, and like the production design, the set dressing, everything. Was it all practical? How did you bring us back in time to those periods, those sets?
Yeah, everything was practical. And so, you know, we had so many incredible people working on this film. Nina, our costume designer, is here. Lauren, our key hair and makeup is here. You know, Bree, our production designer. To try to create this kind of world with a limited budget is incredibly difficult. And yeah, I'm so proud of like what everybody pulled off. I think the film works as well as it does because every single department head just did everything they could to try to maximize their budget and put everything we had on screen. And then we also got lucky. We filmed in 3 different houses all over LA, historic homes. One is a museum. One is a house that's actually from this time period that was one of the oldest houses that's still privately owned in Pasadena. And then one was like this crumbling house in West Adams. So like, but we were able to find the rooms that we needed for this film and then kind of try to tie them all together with our production design, and all of these key elements. So yeah, really it's the crew that made it work, that helped build that world.
Doing a period piece on an independent budget, I'm sure it's a lot of things go along with that. What do you think is the hardest part for you for creating this kind of film?
I think probably the hardest part is post-production, actually. So like, once you have all of this footage, trying to kind of figure out a way to sort of make it all work. And I should say, like, we had an incredible editor, so you might have noticed the film. And this one I'm really trying not to get emotional, but like the film is dedicated to our editor, who passed away at the end of last year, and his name is Toby Yates. He's an incredible editor. He worked on like 24 feature films. I was very lucky to get to work with him on this. This is his last feature. And I worked with him for about 4 or 5 months, on and off, because we kind of kept combing and recombing through the footage. We didn't want to leave any stone unturned, especially for this kind of a film. So there were so many tiny little moments, even as I watch it back now, that I'm like, that was a Toby idea, you know? So to get lucky in that sense to work in our colorist, I don't know if you want to talk about maybe working with them.
Yeah, we had an amazing colorist called Jeremy Sawyer and Adelaide Aaron, and he really helped making it feel like an all-together thing, right? Really pacing it together, and the way we try to make the tone is it involves from like this warm lighting to a little colder to when it gets all cold to then the morning, right? So it really helped with this different location and lighting technique we use to make it a whole together, I would say, yeah.
Yep.
Vivian, so I know I've been with you since like the beginning of this journey, but at what point, considering that some of your movies, like the movies you've done, Scratch, Jillian, is like so much different than this one that you've done, that have you ever thought, fuck, why did I do this? Like,
Yeah, there's been moments of
biggest
that.
challenge, seeing your other movies, just kind of like, oh, this is really different.
It is really different, but you know, I think sometimes I'm a big fan of those 1960s horror films, like The Haunting, The Innocents. I would say a more recent example would maybe be like the 2001 film The Others with Nicole Kidman. These kind of throwback films where everything is practical, and you know, not that I want to disparage Marvel, because I enjoy those films too, but I think we have to fight in our industry, you know, to make films that are entirely practical. I think we have like 5 VFX shots in the entire film, I think, right? And it's, and then they were really just like kind of tiny non-period anachronisms that we just had to like get rid of. But I think you have to fight for that, and I think audiences are smart. You know, you can watch a film like this and feel, oh, it's real. Like none of that's CGI, none of it's fake. Yeah, the rain is all real, all of it, and it was brutal to try to, yeah, the lightning was really a tough thing to try to achieve, and yeah, those are the kind of films that I really enjoy. I mean, not to say if Marvel gave me a call, I wouldn't become a CGI expert, but I think there's a place for these kind of films, and I enjoy them, and I think we have to fight to kind of keep making them.
I just want to go back to the actors. Going into like the period piece like this, is there a different preparation, like trying to get the language down and the way of speaking? Do you have a different preparation to go to kind of get into that mood?
Again, something I completely forgot. I was like, wow, I'm speaking like I'm from, it was like, and it's, I don't remember talking like that. I swear to God. So yeah, and that was just something where like, there wasn't a lot of prep time for this. And then, Vivian she had to remind us a couple times of like, you know, I mean, the first scene where I leave the dinner early and then she comes in to check on me. There was a line, I don't think the line made it, and I was like I want to touch you, And I like, in one take, I kind of went and just like didn't, she was like, don't do that. That's not period. George wouldn't do that. It's like, maybe, I don't know. So we did have to really kind of become, you really had to remember that stuff. And that was probably one of the biggest kind of leaps, is how they communicate a higher society. It's not bay and fire and all that, you know, it's like, it's an old kind of language.
The mannerisms are so specific, you have to take into account, but also we're a modern audience. So, you know, it's a little walking a fine line with that, and still being accessible or appealing to the modern viewer, I guess. But yeah, I felt like watching that, some of playing a character who's desiring touch so much in a culture or in a society that doesn't really lend itself to that at a time, and I'm like, so much is internal, you know, and I think as being a woman who's ahead of her time, but also stuck in the time. It was a strange tightrope to walk for me watching it too. I'm like, oh right, that. So yeah.
Yeah, it was remembering what gentlemanly like protocol and really kind of holding on to that and yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I found very interesting about this film is that, and I say this totally as a compliment, I felt I was watching a stage play at the same time that I was watching a feature film. And I don't know if you intended it to be that way, but that's how I felt and appreciated it so much because it blended both of those types of art. And it was just really fascinating.
I wanted to say something too about the style that emerged that I wasn't prepared for was just how you like just how close up suddenly played. You really, and I don't know if this was maybe Toby's kind of, because you had mentioned before that he really kind of, you can talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of. But by the way, that is like the best compliment you could ever pay me because I was actually. We won't talk about how long ago this was, but I was actually a theater major in college, and part of the inspirations for this, I say sort of inspired by, because it's not really an adaptation, but there's a one-act play by Strindberg called Creditors, and there's a moment in his monologue where he has his monologue about like, you know, what men owe as a husband, and eventually the creditors will come, and there's like 2 lines of that I lifted from that play, and a few thematic things that kind of inspired this. But yeah, I'm like a total theater nerd. And I also think too, kind of like what I was talking about before with like fighting to have things be practical. I remember kind of talking to Toby about the wide shot where we come down the stairs at the beginning of the seance. And when we were sending it out, and we were circling picture lock, a few other director friends were kind of like, why are we in this shot for so long? Like, why are we in it for so long? And I was like, and I remember having this conversation with Toby, who also had a background in theater. And we were like, no, it's a proscenium. Like we're watching like this, the beginning of this play that's going to kind of unfold. I mean, the thing is called Séance, so like let's give it its due. And I think that's the kind of thing where as a director, if you don't have a great editor who's on board with that kind of vision and willing to kind of get a little weird and experimental with it, while still kind of hopefully making it commercial and enjoyable for an audience, you know, you can second guess yourself and be like, oh, okay, I guess we'll cut out of it 30 seconds earlier. But like when we tried that, I was like, I hate it. Like, let's make it theatrical, you know, in a theater sense. So yeah, thank you very much. That was such a lovely compliment. It means a lot to me.
I was really struck by the pacing and the way that the articulation and the posturing, and I was blessed to know my great-grandparents and their dress, you know, it's a timepiece, and I thought it was really captured, and I thought it was very brave to bring that here, because everything is so fast and furious. And when you're, and I've, you know, I was given Emily Post, you know, there was decorum, and there was manners, and it was even in their communication about keeping that culture. And I thought it was such so if I may say, nobody was honest from the very beginning. Everything seemed like it really was. Everyone had some undertone that wasn't upfront. And it built, and you know, you think it's one thing and then it's something else, and I thought it was part of the pacing and part of the time and the way it took time to almost birth itself into the truth, and even the way that you explained you're being nice, you know, he was meant to be nice, but there was this sinister undertone all the time from everybody almost. So you're always kind of wondering who's going to show up as the I thought it was really, everything was subtle instead of just in your face. And it was very appropriate for your time. And the way that my grandparents or great-grandparents would talk about, and you look at the pictures, and so, yeah, I thought it was really intriguing, but it was like, it was the undertone for me as I observed.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Yeah, I agree. I think everything I've sort of read or know about my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and this sort of time period is that, yeah, I mean, obviously life was a lot more slow. I mean, it took, we explicitly don't say, but like the number of the pile of letters that Albert has on the table between you guys, it's like, to send a letter to someone and then wait 3 weeks to get a letter back, and like to have a romance built on the written word is like not something that we're remotely, we can't relate to that at all anymore, So it is a slower time period, and I think it did deserve that kind of care and patience in terms of the length of the scenes, the length of the cuts. But yeah, so thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm really curious about something that you mentioned about the post-production process, because something that really stood out to me in the story is that everything is very well built on each other, and you do a really great job of like putting these little hints in the beginning that then explain why the characters are acting the way that they're acting, or the characters themselves the way that they're behaving and what they're doing, which I think is something that is unfortunately really lost right now in big Hollywood and Marvel, as you mentioned. It's like, oh, they're doing this, why are they doing that? Like, there isn't enough background, and you build the background really beautifully, and you understand why Emma is like, she's torn, but she wants this because she has a bit touch, because from the very beginning. I wonder, was that built in, cooked in from before, and how much of it you found in the post-production? How is that bridge? How much of it did you discover at the end versus was it all there from the beginning?
I think that's kind of the beauty of going on such a long journey with a film. So in the writing, there's things where it's like, we're not gonna learn that George and Emma set this up until we have that scene, and then we're not gonna learn. So hopefully every scene, you're at least learning a big thing about the plot. And so writing wise, structurally, I did kind of plant those seeds. But then the pleasure of post-production is figuring out how to tease those out. We had an incredible post-sound mixer named Ryan Gottschall, and he and I spent so long working on the sound mix for this film. And once I decided that I really wanted strings, especially deeper strings, we sort of came up with this motif, and then we got really interested in how do we develop that, and then where do we want to punctuate it? After what moment, after what scene, and kind of figuring out whatever, not to get nerdy, but it's what instruments belong to which character, that kind of thing. And I hadn't done that before. I certainly hadn't done that before my first feature, and so being able to do that on this was really cool. So it made a much longer post-production process, but it was really gratifying to figure out those elements that could then support the writing. And also I have to say, these actors, there's a reason why I actually had never done this before. I cut quite a bit of dialogue. It's a talky piece to start. So once you have actors who understand all of those moments that their characters are going through, there were so many things where I was able to cut a piece of dialogue because of what was going on in their eyes. Just a reaction that you would make to what Albert said to you as George, it was oh, well, we don't need that dialogue anymore. It's and so being able to kind of strip that out and just let the actors' performances inform that was so great. So yeah, really, it's up to you guys.
There was one thing I wanted to say real fast. The one thing that I remember when I read this and seeing it back, and when we made it, I love the psychology of it. I love that there's no real haunting. I love that it's all in everybody's head. I love the mind games that George plays. He literally is driving her crazy. He sees that she's already, wobbly, and he just feeds it, and he feeds it, and he feeds it, and he brings her in. And I just love the psychology of the piece, and that there's no ghost. It's all you see something that it's because you think it's there, and that's the only reason.
Or maybe there's a goat. No, there could be. There's it's up to interpretation. But yeah, I mean, it is. You're right. It's really much about people's subjective experience, and that they're, kind of creating their own experience through whatever the baggage is they're carrying.
Yeah, one more. Oh, well, all right.
The water scenes are beautifully filmed, and I watching it, I was just wondering, how difficult was it for you guys to swim in those long gowns?
Well, this was the water scenes on the out of the surface was filmed in the ocean. And yes, we did get wet quite a bit, and we did have big waves, and we're like, okay, run back with the camera. But the underwater scenes were filmed in a pool. So we blacked out the pool, and we had lighting there, and we had a wonderful underwater camera operator, Charlie, who was amazing and really worked out with the actors underwater to make all of this happen. But yeah, it's definitely challenging when you work with water, and we had very limited time when we were shooting in the ocean. Because of timing, we were shooting at sunset for a sunrise scene, right? And so I think we had maybe a take or two, and obviously it was very cold. We shot in November, December, something like December. So limited time to shoot and making sure we were getting what we needed. So yeah, it's challenging, but I think it really folded well together. Yeah.
I see why women easily drown themselves in that time period, because a petticoat, when wet, weighs about 50 pounds. And I definitely had a bit of a panic attack. I was like, oh, I've scuba dived before. I don't need a training in this. And then I got in the deep end of the pool, and I was like, total panic attack. And then when I came out of the water in the ocean, I was like, oh, there goes my corset top. So I have my hand on my heart the entire time. Not just because I wanted my hand on my heart. Those are my stories.
It's true. There was every time we would get into the pool, it was like sinking. Like we had a safety diver, and I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't, which obviously is mandated, but yeah, they were necessary because they would come and lift us back up to the top.
I was like, I'm a swimmer. I was a professional.
Yeah.
I was young.
Yeah. No, we're very tired.
All right, yeah.
So you know the scene where the blood's on the wall, it says, I hate you? Who does she hate?
Wait, I don't know. What are you?
No, I was just confused. I didn't know if that was a ghost, or if it was
Maybe.
George.
So I think, I think we've sort of committed to the end that it was all George, but I think that there is a possibility that certain things in the movie perhaps could be Hazel. Maybe you watch it again later. I don't know. But yeah, the I hate you. I think was George. Yeah, it's George. He broke everything in the room. That was George.
Bloody, so I thought you wrote it. Yeah.
Well, I think that we were like, oh, it's it's like pain or whatever. That he's just doing it to really freak her out. That would be a lot of blood.
It was fit.
Lillian would need to go to the hospital for a blood transfusion.
All right, and then just in final, can we hear from each of you what you have going on next? What's up next for each of you?
So actually, my first feature, Scrap, is gearing up for its distribution. So that should happen in December. It should be available on iTunes. You can buy it if you want to see something that's not at all like this movie. And then hopefully we'll do some more festivals with this movie and then get it distributed early next year.
I am currently shooting a new HBO Max TV show that will be released in January called The Pit, so look for it.
Not a thing. I'm going home to Georgia, and I'm going to be with my kids and my wife and my yard and my house, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
I actually got inspired by Vivian writing, directing, and starring in her own piece, and I wrote, directed, and starred in a short film earlier this year I'm putting into the festival, applying for the festival circuit now. And I'm going to Italy next month to shoot a 1980s period piece based on a communist Red Brigade party that kidnapped an American colonel in 1981, who was the only person to have survived that incident. So I play an army wife. I think go shoot in Italy, and I'm not sad about it.
All right. Thank you guys so much again. And,
Thank you guys so much for coming.